Welcome back to the deep dive. This is the place where we take these stacks of really complex information and we try to distill them down into pure, usable knowledge for you.
That's the goal.
And today, we are going completely foundational. We're tackling the bedrock upon which all reliable knowledge is built.
The research sample.
The research sample. Because if the sample is bad, the whole study just collapses, right?
It absolutely does. And we've been analyzing a set of core academic sources on this.
Yeah.
Lecture notes, criteria lists, outlines. Basically, the playbook researchers use.
Okay.
And it breaks down not just the methods of the size, but this internal conflict that every single researcher faces.
Which is?
It's the tension between the perfect, the bias-free academic ideal and then the messy logistical reality of actually getting the research done.
Right, the real world. So our mission today is to distill those key criteria to figure out what makes a sample not just good, but reliable and representative.
And we want to clarify the crucial differences between some of these sampling methods. They can look really similar on the surface, but will they give you fundamentally different results?
So whether you're, getting ready to conduct a study yourself or you just want to critique the next big research headline you read, we're hoping to give you the toolkit to judge its integrity.
We want to show you how a basic list of criteria actually transforms into a dynamic process. It's called the sampling cycle, and it dictates the trustworthiness of any generalization you end up making.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start right at the top. What is the gold standard? I know the sources lay out, 10 essential characteristics for a high-quality sample?
They do. And you can really group them into two competing camps.
The rigorous academic ideals versus the practical realities.
Exactly. Let's start with the ideals, because this is what every researcher is striving for. Number one, and this is the most crucial, the sample must be a true representative of the population.
So if you're studying global consumers,
your sample can't just be people from one city block in London. It has to correspond directly to the known properties of that larger group you're examining.
That's the foundation. I mean, if you skew the representation, you invalidate the entire exercise from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And building right on top of that, the sample has to be objective and completely free from bias.
Which is so much harder than it sounds.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. This is where researchers exert the maximum effort trying to eliminate any factor, conscious or unconscious, that might favor certain subjects over others.
And what else for the ideals?
And finally, for the findings to be, useful and reproducible, the sample has to maintain high accuracy and be comprehensive in its design. These are sort of the academic non-negotiables.
Okay, but these non-negotiables, they sound expensive, and they sound very time-consuming.
Yeah.
And this is where that tension you mentioned kicks in. And I love that the source material doesn't just live in an ivory tower, It immediately acknowledges the real-world constraints.
Yes, the pursuit of perfection has to be balanced by what's actually feasible.
Because, let's face it, a perfectly representative sample that takes 50 years and costs $1 billion is, it's just an academic thought experiment. It's not real research.
Which is why the first practical criterion is that a good sample must be economical.
It has to save energy, time, and money. That's a defining feature, not a nice to have.
It forces a trade-off. It's a trade-off that is constantly being debated in research circles. If you spend all your resources chasing that last tiny percentage of accuracy, you might run out of steam before you even finish the study.
Right. And two other practical criteria really jump out from the source. The subjects must be easily approachable.
And the method has to have practicability for the specific research situation. There's a point made that this was highlighted back in 2006, emphasizing that researchers have to think about their environment.
Can you give us an example of that? Practicability.
Sure. Imagine you need to sample deep-sea organisms, but your budget only allows for a small fishing boat. Your sample selection method, no matter how perfect it looks on paper, is rendered completely useless by the sheer difficulty of collecting the data. Practicability means the method has to be possible within the limits you actually have.
The context, the team, the time frame, all of it.
All of it.
So if you're listening to this and you're evaluating a study, you should be asking, did they balance that ideal of being bias-free with the reality of being cost-effective and feasible?
It's a tough line to walk.
Because if the ideal criteria win out, the study might be impossible. But if the practical criteria win,
the findings might be untrustworthy.
And that tough line brings us right to the next big question researchers face, especially when they're juggling resources. How big does the sample actually need to be?
Ah, yes, the big one.
The moment of truth.
Good.
What is the magic number? Is there like a definitive formula we can just print on a t-shirt?
If only. No, the sources are very, very clear on this. There is no single universal formula to determine the size of the sample.
So what does it depend on?
It depends entirely on the precision the researcher needs to estimate the population parameter. How accurate do you need to be?
Okay, so if there's no fixed number, what guidance does the source material offer? What's the default position?
The guidance is almost unanimously to use a large sample, while the exact size depends on other variables, like how diverse the population is, if you're looking for best practice.
Larger is better.
Consistently, larger is better.
Why, though?
Yeah.
Beyond just, common sense or intuition, what is the core statistical reason a large sample always improves the quality of the findings?
Okay, it comes down to something called the standard error. And this is really the why that you need to grasp.
Let's break it down.
Every time you take a sample, the average result you get, the sample mean, will probably be a little bit different from the true average of the whole population.
And that difference is the noise, right? The error.
Precisely. The standard error is a measure of how far that sample mean is likely to stray from the true population mean. And here's the statistical kicker. The larger the sample size, the smaller the standard error becomes. It's a mathematical relationship.
So let's pause on standard error for just a second. For our listener who maybe hasn't looked at statistics since college, what does reducing the standard error actually guarantee us in plain English?
Think of it like target practice. The true population mean, the real answer, is the bullseye.
Got it.
Every time you take a sample, that's one shot at the target. If you have a small standard error, it means every shot you take lands very close to the bullseye, and all your shots are clustered tightly together.
And a large standard error.
Your shots are scattered wildly all over the target. You have no precision.
Okay, so a larger sample size tightens the spread of our predictions. It makes our data far more accurate, far more precise.
Yes, it means we can be much more confident that our sample mean is actually very, very close to the true population mean. That confidence is invaluable.
So while the exact number is a research design question, the general rule is...
go as big as your practicality and your economy constraints allow, because you are scientifically guaranteed to reduce that standard error and get a better result.
That puts the size debate into perfect context. So let's move from the size goal to the actual selection process.
The sampling techniques.
Exactly. Specifically, the non-probability methods, which are the ones that require human judgment. And this connects directly back to that conflict we talked about, convenience versus rigor.
Yes, and we need to unpack two of the most commonly confused non-probability types, starting with quota sampling.
Right, and people often mistake this one for stratified sampling, don't they?
They do, and they start similarly. Stratified sampling is a probability method where you segment the population into groups, or strata, and then you randomly select from those groups.
In quota sampling.
It starts the same way. You segment the population into mutually exclusive subgroups, let's say based on age, gender, or location. But here is the critical difference that makes it non-probability.
The selection part.
Yes. Once the segments are established, judgment is used to select the specific subjects from each segment based on a preset proportion, or quota.
So the stratification sets the targets. We need, say, 50 men under 30 and 50 women over 50. But then the researcher stands on a street corner and just chooses which specific people to approach until those slots are filled.
Exactly. That choice is judgment, and judgment introduces bias.
Let's use a quick example.
Okay, let's say we're conducting a study on local coffee drinking habits. With quota sampling, the researcher knows they need to hit a quota of, say, 40% of people wearing business attire.
Okay.
So they stand on the street and deliberately pick out people in suits until that quota is met. It's easy, it's efficient, and it's very cost-effective.
But the downside is huge, isn't it?
Massive.
Because the selection wasn't random, the researcher might unconsciously only approach people in, I don't know, expensive custom-made suits.
And you've just introduced an immediate wealth bias. You nailed it.
Yeah.
The technique is easy, but the major disadvantage is that because of that human judgment, it is almost certainly not a representative sample of all people who wear business attire.
Okay, now let's contrast that with the other method, purposive sampling. How does the intent change here?
Purposive sampling is even more arbitrary, in a way, but it's done for extremely focused, highly intentional reasons.
What do you mean by intentional?
It's used because the sample needed is so niche, that the researcher has to pick subjects who are known to be representative of a very specific trait, or they are known to produce well-matched groups for an experiment.
So the goal isn't trying to meet some generalized demographic proportion, like in quota sampling.
Not at all.
The whole idea is picking the sample based on specific criteria that are considered absolutely mission critical for the study.
Let's go back to our coffee example.
Oh.
Instead of trying to interview 40% of people in suits, a researcher using purposive sampling would ignore the general public completely. They would seek out and interview only, say, the two oldest, most experienced coffee bean importers in the entire state.
And maybe the three most famous Q graders, the super tasters.
Exactly. Because the intent isn't to generalize about all coffee drinkers. It's to isolate variables related to extreme expertise in bean quality.
I see. So this technique is only appropriate when the study requires a special emphasis on the control of specific variables.
Precisely. If you need a cohort that meets a very specific, rare requirement, say patients with a particular genetic mutation or engineers who all worked on one complex project, purposive sampling is often the only way to go.
You're trading breadth of representation for incredible depth of expertise and variable control.
A necessary trade-off in some fields.
That clarifies the distinction so well. Quota sampling aims for convenience while trying to hit these general demographic targets, but it risks unconscious bias.
Whereas purposive ignores generalization completely to get maximum relevance for controlling very specific, very specialized variables.
And understanding these techniques individually becomes so much clearer when we place them in the context of the larger research mechanism.
We need to shift focus now to the complete framework, the sampling cycle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this framework shows that sampling isn't just a one-off choice of technique. It's a systematic 5-stage process.
Yes, and each stage depends on the one before it.
So walk us through those stages, but let's talk about the consequences of getting each one wrong.
Certainly. It all starts, fundamentally, at the broadest possible level, defining who you are actually studying.
Stage 1, identifying the universe population.
And if you fail here, let's say you want to study voters, but you only define your universe as registered Democrats, your entire study is doomed from the start.
Because your generalizations in the final stage can't possibly apply to all voters.
They'll only apply to Democrats. Defining the universe correctly sets the boundary for everything that follows. Get it wrong, and you're already lost.
Okay, so once that universe is correctly established, we move to the selection process itself.
That's stage 2, applying techniques for the sample. This is where you make your big decision. Is it a rigorous probability method or a non-probability technique like the quota or purposive methods we just discussed?
And if you choose a low-rigor technique in stage 2, like quota sampling,
the researcher has to understand they are already limiting the potential of the final stage. You've made a choice that impacts your ability to generalize.
then what?
Then we hit stage 3, accepting the sample. This is the moment the researcher commits to that chosen group and that methodology. It's really a point of no return.
Which flows immediately into stage 4, data-producing sample.
This is the execution phase, the actual collection of raw information from your selected subjects. And this is where those practicality criteria, approachable and economical, are tested the hardest.
Because if the sample you selected in stage 2 is impossible to actually reach, stage 4 just grinds to a halt.
Exactly. The execution of the study, the data collection, it has to be feasible. If you get through that, you finally arrive at stage 5, the payoff.
Findings and generalizations.
The whole point of the exercise.
And understanding this cycle shows you the domino effect so clearly. You can't generalize reliably in stage 5.
If you haven't correctly identified the universe in stage 1.
Or used the right technique or sample size back in stage 2. It's a dynamic interlocking system.
A weak link anywhere invalidates the entire chain. It truly reinforces that the sampling process is the integrity checkpoint of the whole research project.
So what does this all mean? If you take away just 2 key concepts from this deep dive into sampling, what should they be?
I think it should be this. A truly good sample has to achieve that difficult balance between the academic ideal being bias-free, accurate, completely representative, and the practical reality of research.
Meaning it must be economical, approachable, and just plain feasible. You can't ever forget that tension.
Yeah.
And the second thing.
When in doubt about size, the answer is always larger.
Right. There's no clear mathematical rule, but a larger sample is scientifically proven to reduce the standard error. Think back to our target practice analogy.
A larger sample size tightens the clustering of your results.
Making your inferences about the population so much more precise and so much more reliable.
That precision ensures your generalizations actually hold up under scrutiny. We saw how crucial it is to aim for that unbiased, representative ideal.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought for you to mull over. We learned that two characteristics of a good sample are its reliability and its economy saving time and money.
The two sides of the coin.
And we know that quota sampling is easy and economical, but it's inherently not representative, and yet it's widely used. So where should a responsible researcher draw the line?
That is the question.
When is the ease and cost-effectiveness of an unrepresentative method like quota sampling worth the sacrifice of the rigorous, unbiased ideal? When, in other words, is easy worth the cost of representation?
That is the defining ethical and methodological dilemma at the heart of so much applied research today.
Something to think about as you encounter the next big study. Until next time, keep digging deeper.